Hello and welcome to the Holographic podcast. I'm your host, Tony, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle, the Salty Dog. Kyle, thanks for being with us today, buddy.
Thank you for having me, Tony. Always an exciting day. Looking forward to our chat.
All right. Good
I
to see
almost
you.
air quoted. I don't know why.
Air quotes, yeah.
Chat.
Chat, cha-ching. So last month on the Holographic podcast, we our shows are they're not so frequent these days, but that's okay. Kyle and I are busy people. Last month on the Holographic podcast, we talked about ski bum life and working in that environment, which Kyle currently works. So that's his work. This month, we're going to talk about my work and what I do, and also something very important to Kyle and I, which is USPS, the United States Postal Service, the post office. So many of you listeners and watchers may not know, I actually am a mail carrier. I work at USPS. It's, I don't talk about it on air a lot, and I don't talk about it on social media a lot. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is because I just don't like to talk about that and boast about it. I just go and do my job. And the other reason actually is the Hatch Act. So just to get it out of the way, there's something called the Hatch Act, and it is an act of Congress. And it says that federal employees are not allowed to have to do certain partisan activities. Just pay no attention to Kyle right now. The Hatch Act says, oh, look at this. The Hatch Act says, yeah, there you go, buddy. Kyle's got his sleeveless shirt on.
100% official U.S. postal issue.
Nice. That's interesting, actually, because I wear a sleeveless shirt. So I'll talk about that. I'm a rural carrier, so I don't wear a uniform like the city guys. So
80s movies wisdom. I look like Dutch, like the
you
bad
do actually.
Blonde,
You
like
do.
The bad blonde kid.
Yeah, you do look like Dutch.
I'm sorry for interrupting the Hatch Act.
No,
sorry.
Friggin' A, that's awesome, Kyle. Actually, I really like that shirt.
I forgot.
So the Hatch Act says a lot of federal employees cannot have partisan activities. Now, for me, that's when I'm on the job. When I'm being paid, I'm not allowed to have a partisan opinion. I'm not allowed to have post things on social media that are political and partisan in nature. And I'm also not allowed at any point to run for partisan office. So when I work as a mail carrier, I'm not allowed to run as a Democrat or a Republican or independent or whatever. I can be on like a school board if it's nonpartisan, but I'm not allowed to run in a partisan office. But this Hatch Act says that when I'm not being paid, when I'm off the clock, which is like right now, I can say what I want. I can have a partisan opinion. It's so when I deliver the mail that I'm impartial, and that because there's a lot of political stuff, there's a lot of different things that people send. And so I'm supposed to be impartial and deliver it to everybody equally, no matter what their opinions are. And so it's a valid act, and it's a valid thing to do. And I take it seriously. Because there's a lot of crazy political stuff out there right now, and all my customers deserve the same service, and I take it seriously. When I'm off the clock, I'm now allowed to say whatever I want, and I can post whatever I want. So now I can
post.
So now I can post whatever I want and say whatever I want. So I work as a rural carrier. In the post office, there's a city carrier. They wear a uniform, and they're in mostly urban areas, and there's rural carriers, and they work mostly in rural but also suburban areas. My route's kind of suburban. I work between Denver and Boulder, so it's not like super rural, but it's designated as rural, and it's mostly suburbs, and I have a few businesses. But as a rural carrier, we're not required to wear a uniform. So if your mail carrier has a uniform, a formal uniform, they're a city carrier. And if your mail carrier does not have a uniform, maybe they have a sleeveless shirt like Kyle, or they just have a t-shirt and a hat. That's what I wear. Sometimes sleeveless shirts when it's real hot. Then they're a rural carrier, and there's a big difference between city and rural because we get paid differently. We have a different union, and we have different days. We have everything's completely different as far as structure for rural and city carriers. So as a rural carrier, I really like my job. Actually, I'm really happy being a mail carrier. I've been there for about 4 years, and I have my own route now. I'm a regular carrier, which means I'm a full-time employee. So I'm a full-time federal employee with federal benefits. And it's actually, it's one of the best jobs I've ever had. So, and again, I don't talk about it a whole lot. So, but right now on today's show, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say it all. I'm going to give the whole lowdown, whatever Kyle wants to know. I'm going to lay it all out there. And so I have a really good experience with USPS because I work there and I really like my job. Kyle, how do you feel about the United States Postal Service?
I feel great about the US Postal Service. I am a huge supporter. I've had ever since I was a little kid, I've had really great relationships with all of my mail carriers. And I even remember the dude's name. It was George. George came to my house every day, delivered the mail. He was very nice. He knew me by name, and it was always pleasant to see him driving by. In addition, I feel like he played a bit of a role even in his just daily comings and goings as like, a bit of a neighborhood watch sort of person.
Absolutely.
So if you ever saw something bad going on, he was always around. And then, in the in between years when I was at college and stuff like that, I didn't really have that much relationship, but I still used the USPS almost exclusively. Like I typically don't drop packages at UPS or FedEx. I am more of I box it up myself and bring it to the post office. And it's just always been a really reliable and positive institution for me. It's been completely cost effective. So even though a stamp now is, well, almost, I think we're up to almost 50 cents, right? Maybe
it's over 50, and they're actually going to raise it again. I think it's going to be 54 soon.
Fine. Okay. So even so, I've got really not much issue with that. When I send a letter, it gets to where I need it to go. And so, yeah, I've always been a big fan of the post office, and I still absolutely totally use it. I remember recently, it kind of died down with all the other things that we could concentrate on: fire, drought, war, Biden, blah, 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 blah. But there was the whole thing, and it's still ongoing, about the weakness of the USPS and how it's being undermined and whether or not they're going to dismantle it. And at no point, for any reasons offered, did I ever think that that was a legitimate or a good idea. I think that the USPS is an incredibly important institution. And even though I don't use it every day, the fact that it comes almost every day, it actually makes me feel good. I don't love some of the things that come in the mail. I wish that there was a way maybe to do something about that. But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that much. I think it's a great institution, and I believe in it, and I believe we should preserve it.
You said a lot there, and we'll unpack a lot of that as the episode goes here. So one of the first things you said was like about that kind of neighborhood watch thing, and that's interesting because I don't really talk about that a lot, but most carriers, we really take pride in our neighborhoods that we have as regulars. So that's my neighborhoods that I go to almost every day. I do watch out for them, and I'm not in the military, and I'm not a police officer, and so I don't pretend that I'm gonna chase down some criminals, but at the same time, I do watch out for the kids, and I do make sure that the neighborhood is in good shape and things like that. And most carriers do. They take pride in the fact that this is a duty that has been bestowed upon us, and we do an oath. We don't do the same oath as some of the military guys and the police guys, but we do an oath, and I take the oath seriously, and we go to our neighborhoods and we make sure that those neighborhoods get the service for the post office, but also that they are, that we go to those neighborhoods every day and make sure those neighborhoods things are the way they are supposed to be. and watch out for those. And I never really kind of thought about it a whole lot, but it's true. That's kind of how I look at it. And so that's cool. That's interesting that you bring that up. You talked about the different ways that USPS has been up and down and attacked lately in the media, or proponents of it, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And so before we get to that stuff, I actually just want to start with a brief history. So brief history of USPS.
Pony Express.
Which actually was only for like 2 years. Interestingly, the Pony Express was only around for like 2 years. It wasn't very successful. It was actually unsuccessful.
But it was something though. Damn it.
It was cool. But it was romanticized, but the Pony Express was horrible because a bunch of dudes died and they recruited kids.
Of course a bunch of dudes died. It was like the 1800s, man. That's what people did in the 1800s. They died.
That's true. That's true. So the Postal Service is in the Constitution. So the history of the Postal Service starts at the beginning of the history of the United States. We're one of the only organizations that's not the military, that a service. We're one of the only services that's in the Constitution. I can't remember exactly what article and line it is, but it says, and it's not very specific, it's only a couple lines. It says, there shall be a postal service that will deliver mail. And so so we have a constitutional mandate. So anytime someone says like, oh, the Postal Service is like this weird government thing and it should be privatized, if you believe in the Constitution of the United States, you can't believe that because it's in the Constitution. So if you think that certain things like, the First and Second Amendment are important, then you have to think the Postal Service is important too, because it's in there.
Yeah. Then Amendment 15.72 lines are they should be important to you too.
Absolutely. Exactly. And so it was, for many years, for the first 150 years, 200 years, it was a pretty small service, and it could take a couple weeks, obviously, to get to where a letter needed to go. And it was mostly letters, and it was still cheap. And they tried to do it. There was actually one point where they tried to have it free for low income people to do letters, and it survived, and it went, and it took tax money in the beginning, and it took tax money. That has changed, but in the beginning they used taxes. Then in the late 1800s, I believe actually the Civil War, officially there was some parcel service, but the late 1800s they started delivering parcels, which are packages. So the customers, you call them packages, but in the Postal Service we still call it a parcel. Anything that's not a letter or a magazine that has it's inside something, or it has a scan on it, we call that a parcel. And so Parcel Service started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Parcel Service started getting a little bit heavier. There is this thing going around that says, kids got shipped as parcels. People use that in the beginning of Parcel Service, and that's true. In the early 1900s, when the USPS started doing parcel package delivery, people took a kid and they put a bunch of stamps on him, and they put him with a mail guy, and they shipped him somewhere. There's even a story that they put a kid in a crate with holes. It's hard to find if that's true or not. I think mostly what they did is they actually just put a kid on a train and gave the mailman stamps. And then the kid went to to their aunt and uncle or whatever in a different city. And that's true. That happened.
You sound embarrassed, Tony. I don't think you should be. Don't be sheepish about that. I mean, it was the 1900s. It was probably the safest way to get a kid from friggin' San Francisco to New York.
Yeah.
Or whatever. You give them to one of these stalwart, brave souls that are used to taking things and places. I mean, I for one, would be perfectly happy putting a stamp on a kid's head just like that, and just sending them off with my mail carrier to get to the next town. We don't need them walking around on the roads by themselves.
That's right.
Bag them and tag them.
Bag them and tag them. So then that was in the, I think of the 20s, early 20s. That was actually
a lot worse than that going on. I can tell you that.
Oh, for sure. No, you know, that I'm sure it was very safe mostly.
Yes.
That was outlawed in the early 20s. They ended up saying, okay, you know what? Parcel service can only be certain things, no kids,
No children.
no children. But they do still ship, and they have shipped live animals. We get a lot of live animals. We actually get a lot of chicks,
Chicks.
and we get a lot of live insects. I deliver live insects all the time. So you can ship certain live animals, but not all of them. Then in the in 1970, the next major thing, 1970, there was the Postal Reconstruction Act, I think it was called. And in what it did is it changed the post office to the United States Parcel Service, USPS. It took the post office and it restructured it, and it made it into an organization that is self-sustaining. So because of the 1970 Act, the post office no longer took tax money, and they used the money they made from letters and parcels to be self-sustaining. And it has been and is and will continue to be. There's a different act of Congress I'll talk about which has screwed that up, but that's what happened. That's why it's USPS and not the post office, because it got restructured. Now there's another side to that that I actually did some research in, because it's not very prevalent of why that happened. And I did some research, and one of the reasons why that happened was actually because of the unions, because of the workers. So in the 60s in New York City, postal workers were being overworked, and they were all mad because they were out in the heat and the cold, and they were getting paid like crap, and they were basically, like a lot of other workers, you know, throughout the 1900s, were just like, we're being completely overworked and this is ridiculous. And so there was a strike. There was a great postal strike at the end of the 60s, and it started in New York City, and it spread actually throughout the whole country. And all these postal workers are like, this is BS. We're getting treated like garbage, and we're overworked, and we deserve better. And the Postal Reconstruction Act actually was one of the things that happened because of those strikes. And because of the Postal Reconstruction Act, we formed unions. The postal workers were able to form unions, and the different, we call it crafts, which are the different workers in the post office, formed unions. And so now there's three main unions. The mail handlers union, which are the clerks. So the clerks you see behind the counter when you go ship a package, they organize the mail. They put the mail where it needs to go. They're called mail handlers. And then the National Mail Carrier Union, which is the city carrier union. And then the Rural National Letter Carrier Union, which is my union, the Rural Carrier Union. And those are the three main unions. And the unions negotiate separately, and we have different contracts. And I think there's like a manager union, there's a supervisor union, and there's a union for the guys that drive the semis around, and there's a couple other smaller unions. But those are the three main unions. And they and the workers were one of the big reasons why the USPS became USPS. And so that's kind of skipped over a lot in history, because they didn't tell me that in my training. They tell you a bunch of history, but they don't tell you that. I had to search for that and find that myself. And then USPS was formed, and then in another interesting act that a lot of people don't know about, in the 80s, I believe, maybe late 70s, early 80s, there was another act by Congress that was pushed through by the aviation industry that said that the United States Postal Service is not allowed to use our own airplanes. We're only allowed all mail and packages that go on air is private. We purchase space from FedEx, from UPS. Those big companies are what ship stuff in the air. We don't have our own airplanes. So if you go and drive to an airport, you see FedEx planes, you see UPS planes, you see all those planes, right? But you don't see USPS planes because there are none, because of an act by Congress. That was the first attempt to make the post office a private institution, and it was pushed through by the aviation industry so they could make more money. So USPS doesn't use their own planes. So airmail actually doesn't exist anymore. It's all private.
I wonder why they did that.
It was lobbied. It was lobbied by these big companies that said, if USPS has their own planes, we're not going to make any money and we're not going to be able to survive. And it's basically a subsidy. If you look at things, all these lobbyists, now these things are subsidized by the US government. So these big airline services are subsidized by the US government. They get a bunch of money to take letters and packages. Most stuff is by freight on the road. So most, packages and letters travel in USPS trucks. Now there are private companies that ship stuff on the ground, and one of those private companies is owned by DeJoy's family, by the way, who just got a big contract. He gave $100 million contract to a company owned by his family for USPS. Our postmaster general is corrupt as hell, and he should be out. So yeah, that's true. Big contract to DeJoy's family.
No, not true, but not surprising.
So then a little later in the late 90s, or maybe it was early 90s.
That's when the guy climbed up to the top of the clock tower and started shooting people, right? That was the next big milestone event in postal history.
I'm skipping
which
over
we're
that.
Still suffering from. Thank you very much, you unhinged lunatic.
I'm skipping over that because no matter where someone works, sometimes you can freak out, but someone in the Postal Service out. And then
now it's like a saying. Exactly. Oh, you're going postal. All right. Postal. Well, shit. Why didn't that get attached to anything else? Like, oh, you've gone full fucking crazy veteran. You've gone full fucking ex-military. You've gone full whatever, like supermarket worker. Yeah. Like, what the frick, man?
Well, what's interesting is that there's that one guy that went to the tower and, postal worker freaked out. But then after that, what happened was some people would go inside the post office who are not workers and shot up the inside of the inside of the post office. And they were labeled as going postal, even though they didn't work there. They just killed people there, but they were labeled as going postal. So it's an interesting media thing, but it is what it is. Yeah. The thing I was going to talk about was in the early 90s, there was an act of Congress that changed the way that federal employees, and specifically post office employees, their retirement fund worked. So the retirement for United States Postal Service employees are pre-funded for 75 years. And at the time it was pushed through, it was like, oh, there's this, it was actually fairly bipartisan. There was a lot of Democrats that voted for it. And so it wasn't just a private industry pushing it through. It was a lot of the corporate controlled politicians in Washington on both sides of the aisle that pushed this bill through, that said that federal employees, a lot of them have to be pre-funded for 75 years. And so people that aren't even born yet, who are going to work at the post office, there's money in there for them. It's kind of ridiculous. And it takes billions of dollars from the Postal Service every year. And that's why we're not profitable. That's one of the only reasons why the post office is not profitable. Not because we suck, not because we don't have a ton of stuff coming in and out. It's because if we make, I think last year it was like $80 billion. It was a lot. And we were in the red by $8 billion. It's interesting. I have all these numbers in my head. Well, that $8 billion went to pre-funding. So if there was no pre-funding of the retirement for 75 years, we wouldn't be in the red. We would be profitable. So that act needs to change, and pre-funding needs to change to only like 5 years or 10 years, which is pretty standard, pretty normal. You can pre-fund retirement for 5 to 10 years and have a nice little chunk in there, and it would take, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it would be fine. But no, we have to do it for 75 years for a lot of people, and that takes billions of dollars out of the Postal Service every year. And that's the main reason why we're not profitable. And so there's a lot of other acts of Congress that dictate things like we're required to go to every address, or if you have a PO box, that we're not required to, but every single person in the United States gets Postal Service, whether it's at your address or in a post office. Then there's other acts like the Hatch Act that dictate things like that, that dictate things that I do. So there's a lot of laws around my job that I have to be aware of. Political mailings, when political mailings come in, like if there's a political flyer, that if there's a house that's vacant or someone moved, I have to treat it in a certain way. I can't just put it where something else goes. Like I have to endorse it and I have to put it here. And so there's a lot of laws surrounding exactly how we deliver mail and exactly how we do things. And I like the job. It makes the job interesting. It's, I don't mind doing it, but a lot of, some postal employees who skirt the laws and they get in trouble and they get in trouble from the United States Inspection Service. United States Postal Inspection Service. The Postal Inspection Service is a branch of the post office that has as much power as the FBI, but they focus on mail fraud. They focus on attacks on the Postal Service. They focus on people going postal, and they focus on employees like me who screw up the mail, who take the mail and put it in the trash. People freak out at the post office and they put mail in the trash, and then the inspection service comes and they arrest you, and you can go to federal prison. And if you attack a postal employee, the inspection service can come, and like the FBI, they can arrest you and put you in federal prison. So I have to watch out. So that was a brief history of the post office. Kyle, do you have any questions about that you need to unpack there?
I mean, no, not really. Thanks for the history. I guess one question I would have for you is, where does all the lost mail and packages go, and how do I get there to sort through it? Because I'm a bit of a trash hound and I'm just always curious what's in the boxes.
So there's actually not a lot. And the reason there's not a lot is because
bullshit.
There's not. The reason there's not a lot is because there's strict protocols about where everything goes. So if there's a package or a piece of mail that is undeliverable, it will be returned to sender. And if unless it's third class. So if there's a third class is junk mail. So if you get a piece of third class mail that's junk mail, that's undeliverable, third class mail does not pay for return service. So we basically recycle it. It's recycled. But there's not, it's mostly first and second class. So first and second class mail, if it's undeliverable, it's returned to sender, and they spend a lot of time figuring out where it's got to go back to. So we don't like to hold on to things. If there's a problem, it'll go back to where it came from. Now if there's a return address that's you can't see it or it's screwed up, that's called dead mail. So if it's first or second class and it's dead mail because we can't figure out where it goes back and we can't figure out where it goes to, there is some mail that's dead mail. And that's what you're referring to, is this, mailer packages that just we can't figure out where it's got to go. And there's a couple facilities that have stacks of dead mail, and I'm pretty sure that they wait a certain, I don't deal with dead mail because it's a specific facility. I think they wait a certain amount of time and then they destroy it. So they don't sell it. A lot of places like airports, they have auctions or whatever. The post office doesn't have an auction. They just destroy it. They screw it. They I think they put it in an incinerator, actually.
Nobody looks through it.
I don't know what they do with the dead mail. I don't
curious. Don't you want to know?
I don't get to go to that facility.
It's probably all supremely boring, but
it is.
I don't know.
So it's like, I have there's almost zero dead mail. Because we spend a lot of time, again, with these protocols, making sure that that every single piece goes exactly where it needs to go. So like I get in trouble if I leave stuff at, everything that comes to me, I'm required to deliver that day. And if I can't deliver it, I have to have a reason. So if I can't deliver just one piece of mail, I have to have a reason why that piece of mail is going back, or why it's going here, why it's returning to sender, or why I'm putting it, I have to put it exactly where it needs to go. There's strict protocols about every little thing that comes into our post office. It's got to go exactly where it's got to go. So there's not a ton of dead mail.
Okay.
And you know, packages, you know, companies will make sure like packages have scans. So it's rare that there'll be like a package, like super rare that there'll be a package that goes into dead mail. It's usually a letter, but sometimes there'll be a piece of, you know, a package that we can't figure out. And yeah, maybe those guys in the facilities, they open it up and play with it. I don't know, man. So I talked about how I really enjoy my job. I talked about how, you know, I take pride in my neighborhoods. I take, you know, I'm, you know, it's a difficult position. It's a difficult job. And I'll talk about that in a second, but I really do. And most employees really do, you know, we take it seriously. That being said, there's this other side of the post office that now we have to talk about, which is the problems, which is the issues, and the issues come from acts of Congress, and the issues come from internal in the post office. The issues come from our postmaster general. So the postmaster general is appointed by the board of governors, and the board of governors is appointed by the current administration. So our board of governors, there are now more Democratic board of governors, but there used to be more Republicans. And then they appointed Louis DeJoy, who's our postmaster general. He's the only postmaster general who we've had in 100 years who's an outsider. Almost every single postmaster general and almost all of our supervisors are come from internal promotions. And DeJoy comes from logistical companies. He made his money through shipping and logistical companies. And so he was appointed to try and whip it into shape from the private sector. And he's basically not done any of that. All he's done is make a bunch of money, like a lot of those guys. But if he disappeared tomorrow, the main problems wouldn't be fixed. If there was a amazing postmaster general who appeared tomorrow, the main problems would not be fixed. And it's because of those acts of Congress, and it's because of a couple specific issues. So Kyle, what have you heard? What have you heard that is a problem with the post office? I'm curious, like what people say, like, because you know, you're a proponent of the post office. What do people tell you why they hate the post office?
Well, I remember when all this stuff was sort of happening or more on the forefront was what, about like probably a year ago when it
Yep.
was really, it's not that people said that they hated the post office so much as like what I heard was that people thought that it was an outdated and not particularly useful to them institution or service. And so, you know, that may be true for somebody's personal experience. They might not use the post office, and they might really sort of like, get mad that they get junk mail or all these other things. That was the main complaint. I would disagree with it because, you can't speak to other people's experiences. You know what I mean? So just because you don't write letters or mail things doesn't mean that there's not a significant portion of the population that does use the post office for certain things. And maybe it does seem a little outdated, but, I don't see why, I mean, that was the main complaint. Like I never really, I mean that, and I also wondered about it because, okay, these people would be like, yeah, well, I just use UPS or I just use FedEx. Okay, fine. Those are private companies and that's fine. That's the way you mail packages. But, why should we dismantle this other system of delivering packages when it's just as valid and just as cheap and just as reliable, if not more so? I just never really understood. So it wasn't that people hated it, although people do complain about, junk mail. I get a fair amount of it, although I got on the National Junk Mail Registry, and that got rid of a whole bunch of it. It sometimes comes creeping back into my life, but I have to make that call again. So that was the main thing I heard, was just that it was outdated and not useful to them in particular. I'm sort of racking my brain to think if there was any really other significant complaints, but no, that was the
Well,
main one.
let's address that real quick. So, it's the Postal Service is in our Constitution, and you had brought up the movie The Postman. So when the Postal Service is in the Constitution, there's a reason they put it in there. The people that formed our country thought that having a postal service and having this sort of thing that was run by the government to take people letters and eventually parcels was so important to society, they put it in the Constitution. And so you brought up the movie The Postman. So tell us about The Postman real quick.
Well, I mean, the movie was widely panned. They thought it was junk, and I thought it actually was really. It was a unique story. It was original. I thought that it was great, and basically, it was like a post-apocalyptic future where there was this vagabond, and he fell asleep or went in a terrible storm, and he found shelter in an old mail truck, which had still had I think like a leather bag full of parcels or letters. And he was at the end of his rope, and he went and started delivering these bits and pieces of mail. And through that small act, against a lot of odds, whether it was weather or just dealing with the rigors of travel in a post-apocalyptic future where there was no easy way to get around, he was able to establish like this like sort of proto social fabric, and reconstruct the idea of a centralized government, and it gave people hope. And there was a villain and a villainous organization in the movie, which was more of sort of like a powerful sort of take it by force organization, more militaristic, less diplomatic. And so they went up against that, and that was fairly, cliche, and that, there was some sort of gladiatorial battle at the end. But, the underlying idea that I took away that I found really, really hopeful was just that, like you said, they put it in the Constitution. The theme was that it really was one of the layers of bedrock from which a society could sort of form or stand on. It was a conduit for information, for correspondence, and it was reliable and safe, and anybody, and most importantly, it was available for anybody to use. So it's like it pulls everybody down to a base level of equality, where it doesn't matter from which slice of society you're from, the very most upper society or the lower echelons of society. Anybody can get a message to anybody else using this very simple, cost effective, and time effective, even in today's modern rapid fire standard when everything has to be delivered instantaneously, like email and stuff. You can mail a letter and it's there in 2 days. It really gets there quickly. So I thought that movie had a lot of value in that. That was one of the takeaways for me. And it wasn't just a fantasy story. That part of it holds true. It's one of the things I see as one of the greatest values of the USPS is just that sort of like its role as like a bone in the skeleton of society. It's a structural member. And would we survive without it? Probably. But should we? I'd say no. Also, I thought it was awesome that Tom Petty was in that movie. He had like this little cameo where he was like the gatekeeper for that, like, that tram on the dam. And
yeah.
Tom Petty's fucking awesome.
Sure.
we lost a shining star.
He was
Anyway,
awesome. He was awesome. I agree. But
and I
that's
think that probably his attitude said to him, his agent was just like, hey, this is interesting. You
yeah.
should be part of this. This is a good thing. And he did.
um
Uh,
but
yeah.
you're what you said is I completely agree. And I think and I will tell you that I am the proof that what you said is correct when you said that it doesn't matter what strata of society you are, the post office is here for you, every citizen, no matter who you are. And that's true, because on my route, I have poorer neighborhoods and I have richer neighborhoods, and it doesn't matter. And I take it very seriously. It doesn't matter who you are and where you come from. I'm going to give you the same service, no matter what neighborhood you come from. And I tell you what, I bet you can guess who comes out and who where I get treated better. You think I get treated better in the rich neighborhoods or the poor neighborhoods? Take a guess.
I'm going to say the poor neighborhoods.
Absolutely. A lot of times these people in the richer neighborhoods, they take me completely for granted. And the people in the poor neighborhoods they're happy to see me. And not that.
And you might be delivering things that are a little bit more important to these people. But I was also going to say, I'll bet you up to a certain age, and this is totally hypothetical, but like, I'll bet you that, the young children in a fancy neighborhood, let's say a 5-year-old in the fancy neighborhood and a 5-year-old in a not so fancy neighborhood, you're delivering a package that contains something that maybe they were expecting or maybe they weren't. You're probably greeted with the same level of delight and happiness, because you are giving them something that, either unexpected or expected, is still bringing them a fair amount of like joy, pleasure. It's exciting to get a letter. It's exciting to get a package. If you send away for something, they're going to send it back. Oh my God, that reminds me. That's a George Carlin right there.
Oh, I was going to say the Dakota ring from, the Christmas Story. He's like, my Dakota ring.
Totally. Well, even George Carlin, I listened exclusively to one of his greatest albums, is Occupation Fool. And he was talking about how, like, as a kid, it was this big thing where you're like, oh, what are you doing? I'm sending away. Sending away for something, and they're going to send it back. There is like a deep level of connection and continuity in that act and the return act that, for me, never went away. So these people that, you're asking, oh, what do they complain about? It somehow has lost its charm. It's lost its usefulness. It's lost its value to them. And for me, it never did. And for a lot of the poor people or middle-class people, it never did. You know what I mean? And so that, there's a ton of value in that service, and it can't be replaced, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's interesting when you go to training, they say, be careful because the kids will love you and the dogs will hate you. And they say, be careful because, the kids will run around your truck and you have to watch out for kids running through the neighborhood, and dogs hate you and they try and bite you. And I'll tell you right now, that's 100% true. The kids love you. The kids come out and talk to you. And I know kids by name, and kids like to run on the truck, and they sometimes, if I know them personally, I'll give them the mail because I know they'll take it to their parents. And you're not supposed to do that, by the way. Don't hear that. They tell you in training, don't give the kids the mail. But when you know the families, you can, when I know them personally, I give it to them sometimes. And the dogs hate you. The dogs hear the trucks, and the dogs come out and they try and bite you. And I've been bit. I got bit on the hand one time. And so that's true. The kids love you and the dogs hate you. And that's just the relationship you have in the neighborhood, and it's great.
I have a question, or more of like a statement. One of the worst things you guys did was you got rid of the fucking Jeeps and you put those stupid fucking boxy George Jetson mobiles out there, which are no longer either. But it is time to bring back.
I have one of those.
Yeah, the ugly, boxy, futury, slant nose, fronty thing.
Oh, those aren't even here yet.
No, there was one that's already come and gone. Anyway, point is, go back to the Jeep with the sliders.
We can't. And I'll tell you why we can't. It's because of Parcel Service. It's because they changed it because there's so many packages we couldn't fit it all in one route. So we had to get a larger truck. because when the Jeeps were around, there was mostly mail and very few parcels. There was, on my route, I have around
You
seven.
Then contract with Jeep to make you a bigger vehicle then.
Don't tell me about contracting with other companies. Hey man, the
I am
post.
telling you, Tony, because you're the
I'm saying
only postal officer officer I know.
it's a very dysfunctional way that how we get vehicles. So I drive something called an LLV, which stands for long life vehicle. It was made in the 80s, and it was the next generation after the Jeeps, and it's still around, but they catch on fire all the time and they break down. I'm serious, and they break down, and they're basically death traps. And we haven't had any new, and we have a next generation after that are these Fords, and everyone hates them because you can't deliver out of them because they're designed like garbage. It's very dysfunctional the way that they do the vehicle.
Grumman sorry for interrupting.
The Grumman LLV.
You started skipping as soon as I grabbed another device and just tried to do some research. So it's like, unless I have it committed to memory, I can't do research on the fly with our thing because of a whole nother issue, which is Comcast, which is bullshit. But we're not doing that now. The Grumman LLV, it's just, all right, fine.
That's what I have. And you know what's interesting, Kyle, is because I know that
junk.
No, it's not junk. It's actually the best thing to deliver out of, because it was designed to deliver a lot of mail and packages. So for delivery people, even though it's old and it's garbage and we wish we had better ones, we want that one as opposed to the other ones they're giving us, because it's the best to deliver out of. It was designed to deliver good. It was designed so you can get packages in mail and hop out and do it quickly. The new ones, the newer generations, weren't designed by mail people. They were designed by fools sitting behind a desk who made the engine a little bigger and made this a little different, and they thought it was cool. But you can't, there's no sliding tray, and you have to hop over it to get to the package, and you can't put it here because there's a thing and blah, blah, blah. And it's
you sound like Newman. Because the mail never stops. Anyway, I'm still stuck on this nostalgia of the old Jeeps. It's fine.
That's why we had to change. Too many packages.
I get it. I love those old Jeeps. That's what I grew up. That's what George, the mailman, used to deliver in. My mail people up here, there are no actual bad mail carrier trucks. It's all people's personal vehicles.
They use most rural carriers who are out in the sticks where Kyle lives, they use their own vehicle and they get paid well for it. We get paid well when we use our own vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of them, occasionally you'll see a right-hand drive vehicle, but most of them actually operate with left-hand drive vehicle, and they have a way to sort of, I think they use grabber things, and they get to be pretty adept. I tell you, I wouldn't go toe to toe with my current mail guy now. He's got, with that machine, he's got 8-foot reach. He'd put my eye out and get me right in the crotch before I even made it inside his circle.
So we digress a little bit. I want to get back, because I had a point to what you were saying, how mail service is a bedrock of society, and that it's important as a civilized society to have this service for everyone and to be impartial about it. Now, let's say that, and by the way, just on those lines, we get a lot of parcels from UPS and FedEx. FedEx and UPS drop off mountains of parcels to us to deliver because they don't want to do it, they don't have the manpower to do it, or it's too expensive. So if the post office was eliminated and there was only private companies, first of all, just a letter to get to a rural address like you, or a rural address out in the middle of nowhere,
there's no way.
It would be so expensive. Or a package. Do you know how much money you would pay for a letter or a package to get to a rural address if the post office was eliminated? You would pay, they've actually done studies, you would pay between $50 and $100 to get a letter out to the middle of nowhere, because UPS and FedEx do not want to go, and it's not sustainable for them to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll take my 50-cent stamp. Thank you very much.
That means that there are so many people who don't live in urban areas who wouldn't get this service. And that's why the post office is important, because it treats everybody the same and it tries to keep prices low to to get everyone be able to get a letter.
Yeah, also, and let's put ourselves in the situation of another person, an old person.
Yeah.
An old person who is still reliant on the mail service for important documents, you know, whether it's an old school billing system because they're not into online stuff, or medications by mail, or simple notification and reminders, you know, that they have a doctor's appointment, or that they need to go see their caregiver, or that their caregiver is coming to see them. You know, it's like this part, I think this isn't the only thing happening, but our society has a tendency to undervalue or devalue old people. There's a lot of other societies across the world which in many ways are not advanced the way we are, but they are advanced, or they, I guess advanced is the wrong word, they value their older generations. They sort of see that they should be taken care of. And this is just sort of an extension of that. You know what I mean? It's like anybody that's modern is just like, oh, you know, roll with it, get with the new, do this, do that. It's like there are people out there that either can't or won't, or what, if that's legitimate or not, not legitimate, doesn't matter. It's like you can't always have somebody, you know, do the newest best. You know, I have an uncle, I just went to visit him. He is not all perfectly together. He's dependent on certain societal systems to keep him rolling along. But one thing he likes to do is he's into history. He lives in Brooklyn. And so, you know, he decided, sent away by mail to become part of the New York Historical Society, which he was. And while I was there, we opened up a letter from the New York Historical Society, and that was all fine and good, except every single event that the New York Historical Society has on the calendar has to be registered for and checked out online. He does not have the ability to do that, and he doesn't have anybody to do it for him. So, you know, there was a phone number. So I encouraged him to call the phone number to see if maybe they can make an exception for him and send him something paper in the mail. But the point is, you need institutions like this to cater to a certain segment of society, which is not marginal. It is still substantial, of people that cannot or will not do the most modern version of things, which is all computerized and digitized. You know, and then of course, you know, again, there is like life-saving medications that come by mail. There are all these other things, and we can't forget about those people. And that's where this agency right here comes into play. That's a big one.
You're absolutely right, Kyle. And actually, you'd be surprised. People would be surprised how much medication I deliver, how many checks by mail I deliver. I deliver so many important things every day, like more than you would think. And so when people say like, oh, that's a really small segment of the population, it's actually not.
How do
It's
you know
actually
that the check that you're delivering? You opening mail?
no, you can see. Yes,
You're
Kyle, I open
mail?
every single piece and I lick it.
You're looking through the mail. You're holding it up to the light.
No, it says clearly on it, pay to the order of.
On the envelope?
Yeah, a lot of the checks that I deliver through the screen, it'll have the name of the person, but it'll say pay to.
Huh.
So I mean, you know, as
my grandma used to send me $25 on my birthday every year until she passed away. Those were important fucking days for me.
So I actually took a memory test to get my job, which yeah, and so I actually have a really good memory, and it's my job to make sure the names are correct and everything's correct. So I'm impartial and I do it correctly. I do it by the book, but I can't help but notice what everyone gets. You just see what everyone gets. I see when they get checks. I see when they get Viagra pills. I see when they get, you know, weird stuff. I see when they get jury duty. I see when they get summons. I see when they have when the court is looking for you. I see that I see all that. Now I'm not going to tell you specifically who and why and what, but I see all that. Now it's our
And
job.
we can also say that none of the things that you just mentioned are anything less than very important.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Even the
Exactly.
Viagra.
Exactly.
I
So
mean, it's like,
yeah,
who are we to decide that those things are not of the highest level of value to the people that they're going to?
absolutely. And there's a large segment of population that does not get it, do everything online. And it's larger than people think. And so to say like, oh, that's like outdated, or it's an outdated thing, like it's really not. It's at this point, it's not yet. If there was like, if there was a push to make things different and to make it easier for elderly and to make it easier for everyone to get all that stuff, that's fine. But there's not a push for that right now. That's not being done. Private companies, either you pay or you're out of luck. And so because private companies are not giving all these options, like people will say like, oh, well, if we just had more options for private companies. Oh, the private companies are not, they can't make a profit from all that stuff. So the post
And so
office
they'll
is,
cut it off.
yeah, they'll just cut it off. So the post office is really, really highly needed right now for a large segment of the population that I deliver a ton of that important stuff to every single day. You'd be surprised every day how much medication I have, like a lot, like a
Mhm.
ridiculous amount, too much. There's a lot of medication that people take, but it's not my place to judge. I deliver it, but there's a lot of it.
Mhm.
And so I want to go into something else because we've been talking good and we're running out of time. So there's changing the pre-funding with the with in Congress. That's very important to get the post office profitable. But there's two other things that I see that get skipped over politically that are very important in the post office that need to change. And one of them is how we treat our subs, our new employees, and second is how management. So
Subs, short for subhumans.
that's, yeah, exactly, yeah. So our substitutes, our subhumans, when you come in the post office, every single person starts as a sub. Every single person starts as a non-career, and you basically have to work your way into a career position. I've worked my way into a career position, but my time as a sub was horrible. Like, you get treated really poorly and you get paid less and you don't get the full benefits, and it's like, it's weird. It's hard to explain, but it's a really, really difficult job at first. The learning curve is really steep. So, right. So once you learn it and you get good at it, we make it look easy. But when you first come in, that first month is like so stressful and it's so hard, and the turnover is really high. So when people come in and start at the post office, more than half of them quit. It's a ridiculous amount. And so, and it's because it's so stressful and it's so hard, and you get treated like such garbage. So the subs are treated like garbage. And the other side of that coin is management. Our middle and upper management is have their heads up their asses. Lower management, like our direct supervisors, they're not as bad. And my direct supervisors, like, I don't want to crap on them too much because I know that they are kind of more, they are on the front lines and they deal with a lot of bullshit. But middle and upper management, who give the directives for those subs, middle and upper management tell lower management, you need to do this for the subs because we don't want to pay them and this and that. So middle and upper management is just like, have their heads up their asses. And one of the reasons is because a lot of times in the Postal Service, you don't get promoted because you're competent. You get promoted because you say yes and because you toe the line. So it's a government institution. So like in the military, you toe the line and you say yes. But if you're not competent, like if you can't show how competent you are at shooting or show how competent you are at leading troops, you're never going to get promoted. In the United States Postal Service, you don't have to show that you're competent to lead people. You just have to say yes, and they'll just put you in charge of something. And they shift people around all the time. They put postmasters in charge of this, and they put this guy in charge of this. And if they make a mistake, they just send them to a different office. And like the higher management is just so horrible. And I will shit on them all day, and I'll tell them directly to their face, I'm union protected, so I can talk shit whatever I want on the job. I can tell the managers they're full of shit, and they can't, and they can try and discipline me, but I don't care because I'm a member of my union. I'm a paying member, and I know a lot of union stuff. I'd be a union steward if I had more time. It's time consuming and I have kids and I don't want to be a union steward, but I know a lot of stuff and I will fight for my employee rights, and I will tell those supervisors that they are full of shit and what they're doing is wrong. And I'll tell them exactly what needs to be done. I'll say, this is wrong and this is how you do it, but they're not going to listen. And so the upper management, so I could go on for a while. What needs to happen though, is there needs to be a complete nuking and restructuring of postal management. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. And that's not going to happen without some real leadership. But when people in the media, or when, the average person hears about the problems with USPS, they don't hear about this. And so I want to make this clear, and I want to put this out there, that this is a major problem with USPS. Is it's not just our postmaster general. It's not just the politics behind it. There's a real issue with leadership and with the management of USPS. Over the years, it's become cronyism. It's become kind of weird and mismanaged. And so they need to get rid of a lot of managers, train managers better, have better structures of treating people better, and they need to treat their subs better. There needs to be better training and better things with retaining employees. So just real quick, there was this post office that couldn't deliver a bunch of stuff, and they were having all sorts of problems, and they were really falling behind. And the congressman actually got involved because all the constituents were like, our post office sucks, get involved. So the congressman sent a letter and he got involved. And one of the high managers at USPS, probably from the directive of DeJoy, sent a letter saying, oh, well, we're really slow because we can't find people because they're all getting unemployment. And so that's the attitude that the high managers have, that, oh, people don't want to work. It's because they're getting handouts. And that's 100% total bullshit. The reason that post office sucked is because their managers sucked, and the high managers have their heads up their asses, and the subs were being treated like garbage, and they quit, not because they don't want to work, because they're getting treated like garbage. So just to get that out there, when you hear on the media something that talks about the politics or the reason why USPS doesn't have its shit together, no, it's not because people are getting unemployment and don't want to work there. There's plenty of people that get hired there, but they quit because they get treated like garbage. And the post offices are slow, not because of that, of unemployment benefits. Post offices are slow because the managers have their heads up their asses and it's being mismanaged. So that was my rant about the actual internal workings of USPS, the major problems. Kyle, what? Kyle's like, wow. So, I went over it real quick, but I just talked about like how to fix, how to deal with it and how to fix it. But I think Kyle, brings up a really good point about the people that you come in contact with, like your postman. Like you had that good relationship with your postman, and you see your postman every day, and that's the future. The Postal Service is people who are doing this service and dealing with this every day. And I think right now that's one of the major problems. That's what's, we're being taken advantage of somewhat. I mean, again, with the union, like our contract could be much better and our pay could be better. We have good benefits, but everything else could be better. The rural union is actually in between contracts right now. Our last union contract expired in May, and they're renegotiating. And so the negotiations are happening between our high union guys and DeJoy, and
We're losing people, Tony.
We probably lost people in the first 5 minutes.
No.
So how do you think the post office could be better, Kyle?
I think the post office is awesome. I got zero complaints. I really do.
Wow. All right.
I mean, I honestly, nothing, I don't have much complaints at all. You know, I put something out there, I throw a stamp on it and it goes away and it gets to where it needs to go. I already told you junk mail is a small price to pay, and sometimes it's worse and sometimes it's better. You know, I had a mail guy here that would come screaming down the road, and when it rains, you know, they'd leave a little bit of a trench when they came to a screeching halt, and the tires would rut up, you know. But again, those aren't really post office issues. No, I just want it to stay solvent. And I actually, for one, would be perfectly fine if a bunch of my tax dollars went towards funding the post office. I've got zero qualms with that. I think it'd be a perfectly reasonable thing. My tax dollars are going to a lot of places that they don't need to be going to, and so based on my the value I put on the USPS, I'd be perfectly happy to see a slice of my dollars going towards it to help it. Yeah, but as far as complaints, I got none.
I agree with that with the tax thing. Even though the USPS takes some money from Congress had to give us some money when in I think the last decade when we were behind so much, again because of that pre-funding thing. It wasn't because we suck, it was because of that pre-funding thing, and that's where some of the money came from. But remember, it's called the United States Postal Service, and it's a service, and as we've talked about it as a bedrock of society, you know, this service, our aim should not be profit. And that's, I think, what I want to get out there too is this: the United States Postal Service should not be about profit. It should be about service. And that's what most employees like myself take seriously. We're trying to give this service. And so if we're not profitable, who cares? Because we're here to make sure every single person in society gets good service and gets these valuable things that they need. Boom, bottom line.
Boom.
So I'm gonna end the show with some 80s movies wisdom, and I'm gonna dedicate this one to the managers, to the middle and upper managers. It's from Revenge of the Nerds. 80s movies wisdom, Revenge of the Nerds, awesome movie. So in my, you know, sometimes I like to say douchebag, and I like the term douchebag, although I think the young kids don't use douchebag as much. Kyle, you think the young kids use douchebag as much these days?
I only hear douchebag coming out of older people's mouths.
Okay. So I think douchebag is a older rip, but
I don't really think that, I mean, are ladies still doing as much douching as they once did?
I couldn't tell you, but the earliest known use of douchebag.
They are.
I think there's different things.
Did you just say the earliest known use of douchebag?
No, the term douchebag, Kyle. I'm talking about the vernacular.
I know. I just
Okay.
what just came out of your mouth. The earliest known use of douchebag.
The earliest known use of the term douchebag in popular culture as a insult that I found actually came from Revenge of the Nerds. I think it was like 1984 when that movie came out. And no, check this out. This is what happened.
Do your thing, but I'm going to tell you, I already know one that's earlier than that.
Okay, fine. One of the earliest known ones. Kyle's going to tell another one.
To you.
Fine. One of the earliest known ones to me was in Revenge of the Nerds, where the nerds found their new home and they fixed it up. And Booger, you know, Booger's out there, and a jock comes up and he's looking at him and he's like, "Oh man, they got a new house." And Booger's looking at him, picking his nose, and the jock says, "What are you looking at, nerd?" And then he drives away, and Booger goes, "I thought I was looking at my mother's old douchebag, but that's in Ohio." That's it. And he uses the term douchebag. And then after that, douchebag became more popular and they started calling people douchebag.
So that's fine. But where does that tie into 80s movies wisdom and the theme of the show?
It's dedicated to the douchebags who are in upper management.
Oh, fine. Great. Got it. Okay. Now, let's just get this thing tied up here.
Where did you?
One thing George Carlin, yet again, same album, used the word douchebag, and that predated the Revenge of the Nerds by probably 12 or 15 years.
He used douchebags in the 70s?
Well, he used it in some of his comedy. Yeah, he was talking about your people, the Italians, because he grew up in New York City, so he's going through the whole thing. He's like, he knew the Italians, he knew the blacks. The Italian guys, they talk like this. They would, and their insults. The guys were always scumbags. The girls were always good douchebags. Hey, this scumbag last night, he went out with a couple douchebags. He didn't call me. That was in 1971.
You know what? I'll have to look into that. I thought the 80s were the beginning of the douchebag movement, but all right, maybe George Carlin was on the front line. He was an innovator.
I mean, I think you know what? This sounds like a whole nother show. I don't think now is the time or the place.
All right. Well, we'll have to have another show on the how douchebag came into the vernacular.
History of douchebags, whether or not people still use douchebags.
Right. Love it. All right. Well, I don't know where to go from there. So that's it.
Started out high, ended up low.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. United States Postal Service and douchebags. We go hand in hand. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, Kyle.
You're welcome, douchebag.
And this is the Holographic Douchebags signing off.